Today's mindful moment, packed with insights but designed to fit into your busy life. One deep dive at a time.
Okay, so let's think about this for a sec. Like, imagine your grandparents, right? They probably used oil or coal to heat their homes. And the air, especially in big cities, not exactly what you'd call clean. And all that meat came from huge farms taking up tons of land.
Yeah.
But now, fast forward, right? Picture a world, a present even, where energy is super cheap and clean, almost like it's free. Food growing right in the middle of cities, stacked up high in these vertical farms.
Like the whole idea of using all that land for livestock
Yeah.
seems totally outdated.
Right, thanks to things like cellular agriculture. It's like, why bother?
Exactly. And all this, it's not some far-off sci-fi thing. It's just, it really shows how much things can change. I mean, like, really fast. In a single generation even. Our society, tech, everything.
Yeah, totally. And the core of all this, it seems like, is this idea of abundance. Having enough, right, enough of the stuff that really matters to make life better for everyone.
Yeah. Like we're talking about the basics, where we live, how we get around, the energy we use, our health, all that.
Exactly. And that's kind of what we're going to explore today, this whole idea of abundance. Like, what does it really take to get there?
Oh.
To a future where, like, you don't have to worry about not having enough of those basic things.
Yep.
What are the roadblocks? What can we learn from, like, the things holding us back,
Right. Because, I mean, if we have the potential to reach this abundance, like you're saying, then why are we still dealing with all these shortages in housing, healthcare, all these areas?
Right. Okay, so one thing that some folks are saying is that, especially in America, we've been kind of stuck, right? Stuck in these ideological battles, like this constant back and forth, and a feeling that everything's going downhill,
Oh, yeah, the doom and gloom narrative.
Exactly. And that maybe this focus on fighting over ideas, it's blinded us to places where, like, even though we think we're disagreeing, we're actually on the same page. And those agreements, they could be the things actually holding us back.
Interesting, like a sort of ideological collusion, you're
Yes.
saying. That's fascinating. Could you give an example of that?
Sure. Think about the whole size of government debate, right? For ages, it's been about whether government should be bigger or smaller.
Right. Classic debate.
Yeah. But maybe that whole argument distracted us from something way more important. Whether the government, like, regardless of its size, can actually get things done. Does it even have the power to make real change?
That's a good point.
And at the same time, we've had this explosion of consumer goods, right? Like, we can buy pretty much anything we want. But that might made us miss the fact that we're actually running low on other important stuff. Housing,
Yeah.
Affordable energy, solid infrastructure, real breakthroughs in science.
Right. And if you look back, there's definitely this pattern where both major parties, they kind of had doubts about big government intervention, especially when it came to, like, directly shaping supply.
Totally. Like, think about Jimmy Carter, right? Democrat. Back in 1978, he even said that the government couldn't solve all our problems or tell us how to live our lives. And then years later, another Democrat, Bill Clinton, comes out and says the era of big government is over. So it's not just a conservative thing, it was a broader feeling that maybe government shouldn't be too involved.
Interesting. And so that leads to what this focus on demand side economics, like just get people spending and the supply will catch up. Right?
Exactly. Like, just encourage people to buy more and everything will work itself out.
Yeah.
But then COVID hit, right?
Oh, yeah.
Suddenly everyone wanted stuff, but the global supply chains
Broken.
gone. No more toilet paper, It really showed that just focusing on consumption, it's not enough. You got to make sure the whole system for producing and delivering those goods, that it's strong enough to handle the demand.
Yeah. So you need both, the demand and the ability to actually produce what people need.
Absolutely. And here's this crazy example of how fast things can change. Think about New York City, right?
Yeah.
Between, like, 1875 and 1905, just 30 years.
Okay. Yeah.
In 1875, no electric lights, no cars, no way to listen to recorded music.
Yeah.
But by 1905, skyscrapers all over the place, cars everywhere. You could buy aspirin, Coca-Cola. The Wright brothers are flying. You could actually listen to recorded music for the first time. It's like a totally different world in just one generation.
That's wild. But if we look at how cities are changing today, especially those, like, super popular, expensive cities, it's not really the same, is it?
No, not at all. It's like those cities, They used to be places where people could build a life,
Yeah.
climb the ladder and all that. But now it's like they're these exclusive, super expensive products. Like Michael Bloomberg even said, he said, if New York City is a business, it's not Walmart. It's like a high-end product, maybe even a luxury. So the whole focus shifted from a place to build a life to a place where you kind of need to be rich already to even get started.
And it's kind of weird, right? Because you'd think with technology, you wouldn't need to be physically located in these expensive hubs anymore. But actually, we're seeing even more talent and innovation crammed into those same expensive cities.
Yeah. It's this thing called increasing returns to innovation. Basically, as it gets easier to reach customers anywhere, those big, dense hubs become even more valuable. They have this concentration of knowledge and skilled people that makes being there worthwhile, even with the crazy high costs. And even with remote work on the rise, think about what Zoom did. They told everyone to come back to the office. Even they realized that for some things, being in person is still important. For building trust, really collaborating deeply. It's just not the same online.
And all those people crammed into these super desirable cities where there's just not enough space.
Yeah.
That feeds right into the housing crisis, which is a huge, fundamental problem if we want to reach this abundance thing we're talking about.
For sure. So about the housing crisis, zoning laws, right? That's a big one. Originally, zoning, it made sense. You want to keep factories separate from where people live, right? Totally logical.
Yeah, keep things organized.
Exactly. But over time, especially with more trucks and buses, zoning kind of turned into this tool for limiting growth, period. And a big part of that was limiting new housing.
Yeah. It's interesting. You look at places like Lakewood in the 1950s. They went from farmland to a full-blown city super fast. But then you have things like the Petaluma Plan, which basically put a hard limit on growth.
Right. And that became the model for restricting how much housing could be built, especially in California. California, which used to be the housing king. In the mid-20th century, they were building over 200,000 homes every year. Now, they can barely hit 150,000. And all while the population keeps growing, right?
Yeah.
So way less building, more people, and the result...
More homelessness.
Exactly. And there's this research by Greg Colburn and Clayton Page Alden that makes a really interesting case. They're saying that homelessness, at its core, it's a problem of just not having enough housing.
Okay.
They use this analogy, right? Like musical chairs. If you've got enough chairs, everyone gets a seat.
Makes sense.
But if you take away chairs, even though people are playing the game the same way, someone's going to end up without a seat. And those people, they're more likely to be the ones already struggling, right? Poverty, addiction, mental health issues, all that.
I see.
Take California. They don't have the highest rates of poverty or addiction in the country, but their homelessness crisis, way worse than a place like West Virginia, where those individual problems are much more widespread. The point isn't that people in California are just unlucky. It's that through policy, we've literally taken chairs away.
So the problem isn't just individual failings, it's the system itself.
Yeah. We've set things up so that there's not enough housing to go around. And then there's this other idea that Jerusalem Dempsey talks about. She argues that there's this inherent conflict, right? We want homes to be affordable for everyone, but we also treat them as investments.
So scarcity makes houses more valuable, which is good for homeowners, but it makes it way harder for new buyers to get in the market.
Exactly. And we got to talk about the NIMBYs too, right? Not in my backyard.
Oh, the NIMBYs.
People who already own homes, they often fight against new development, even if it means less housing and higher costs for everyone else. A lot of times they're worried about their property values going down or changing the character of their neighborhood. It's a tough situation.
Yeah, it's complicated. And then you have the environmental movement, which, it started for all the right reasons.
Oh, yeah, totally. The mid-20th century, the environment was a mess. Smog everywhere, polluted rivers.
All right.
Books like Rachel Carson's Silent Spring and The First Earth Day in 1970, those were huge in getting people to pay attention. And that led to a bunch of really important environmental laws between 1966 and 1973.
So those were big wins for the environment.
Totally. But then there's this thing called the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA.
CEQA?
Yeah. It was originally meant for public projects like highways and stuff. But then, because of this court case, Friends of Mammoth, it ended up applying to pretty much any development that needed a permit, even private ones. So now, even if everyone agrees that, say, a renewable energy project is a good thing, it can get tied up in lawsuits and challenges for years. And sometimes, even if the project has clear environmental benefits, it never even gets built because the process is so complicated.
Wow. So it's like this environmental law meant to protect the environment is actually making it harder to build the stuff we need to fight climate change.
Exactly. It's called the green dilemma.
Hmm.
You want to protect the environment, but the rules designed to do that can actually get in the way.
Makes sense. And on top of that, trying to get people to use less energy, politically, that's a nightmare.
Oh, for sure. Like, we've seen those huge protests when gas prices go up, right?
Yeah.
And in a democracy, trying to pass really radical green policies, it's super hard,
Right.
even if the long-term benefits are clear.
Yeah, it's a tough sell.
Which brings us to energy, right? Like the whole energy transition. Energy is like the foundation of everything. And as this guy, Hans Rosling, said, there's this huge problem of energy inequality in the world. Some people have tons, others have almost nothing.
And the good news is there's been so much progress in clean energy tech, right? Solar, wind, nuclear, geothermal, hydropower. I mean, we know it's possible to cut those carbon emissions way down. Just look at how different countries with like similar standards of living have such different carbon footprints.
Right. But this whole electrify everything thing, it's a huge undertaking. We're
Yeah.
talking about replacing billions of machines that run on fossil fuels with clean electric versions. And then the grid, right, we got to make the electricity grid way bigger and cleaner. Like one estimate from this guy, Jesse Jenkins, says we basically need to rebuild the entire grid every 15 years until 2050.
Wow. And the amount of space we'd need for all that new energy infrastructure like solar and wind farms.
Yeah.
Talk about areas the size of like multiple states combined. It's a massive project.
It's absolutely massive. Okay, here's another thing to think about. Productivity in the U.S. construction industry. It's been slowing down for a while, and this isn't just an American thing. It's happening all over the world.
Interesting. There's this theory by Manker Olson that I might explain it. He said that in stable societies, you get these like really organized interest groups that become more powerful over time.
Okay.
And that makes it harder to get things done because everything needs more negotiation, more regulations,
Yeah.
Like look at how fast China can build infrastructure compared to us. It's a big difference.
Yeah. And all those regulations, while they're supposed to be good for everyone, they can also make it harder for new people to get involved in certain industries. Like, if you don't know all the rules, you're at a disadvantage.
That's a good point.
And back in the 60s and 70s, we had this rise of environmentalism and consumer protection, right? Led by people like Ralph Nader, which, led to some great things like less pollution. But it also kind of led to this culture of democracy by lawsuit. It became easier to challenge and delay projects, even good ones.
So, like, the same forces that push for environmental protection might now be making it harder to build the clean energy stuff we need.
Kind of, yeah. And there's this idea, the procedure fetish, that Nicholas Bagley talks about. He says that within liberalism, there's been this focus on process, on doing things the right way, and sometimes that focus on process overshadows the actual goal. Like, we get so caught up in the rules that we forget about actually solving the problem.
Interesting.
And then there's Robert Kagan. He adds that Americans have always been kind of suspicious of government, right? But they also want the government to do stuff.
Yeah.
So you get this adversarial legalism where we're constantly using the legal system to fight with the government, even when we want the government to take action.
Makes sense.
And all this web of regulations and procedures, it affects science too. It's led to what some people call the Carico problem.
The Carico problem, what's that?
It's this idea that the way science is funded in America, it's kind of biased against young scientists and really unconventional, risky ideas. Like, there's this scientist, Catalin Carico. She had a really hard time getting funding from the NIH for her research on mRNA, and that research, it ended up being super important for developing the COVID vaccines, but she almost didn't get the support she needed. And we're also seeing that the average age of scientists getting NIH funding is going up.
Really?
Yeah, it's like maybe there's this hesitation to invest in the next generation of researchers.
Mm-hmm.
And like, historically, American innovation went through these phases, right? It started with solo inventors. Then you had big corporate labs like Edison and DuPont. Then after World War II, it was all about the NIH.
Right.
But now there's this growing criticism of the NIH, right? It's too bureaucratic. The grant application process is super complicated.
Yeah, I've heard scientists complain about that.
Oh, yeah. John Dewish, the scientist, he talks about how much time is wasted on paperwork, And there's this whole thing about grantsmanship, like becoming really good at writing grant proposals, even if that doesn't necessarily mean you're the best scientist.
So it's like playing the system instead of actually focusing on the research.
Exactly. And this whole, like, risk-averse funding environment.
Yeah.
It's kind of the opposite of what made places like DARPA and Bell Labs so successful. They were these idea factories, right?
Yeah.
Really agile, focused on a specific mission. They brought in the best people, gave them space and time to work, and encouraged collaboration. And that led to some huge breakthroughs like the internet and the transistor.
Yeah, those are some pretty big deals.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Speaking of extracting insights and stuff, have you heard about Mindful Moments in our podcasts?
Mindful Moments in our podcasts.
It's this YouTube channel, uses AI to break down audiobooks and helps you pull out the key takeaways. Kind of like what we're doing here, just with different sources. So another thing we got to talk about is this idea of the eureka myth. It's like we put so much emphasis on the moment of invention, right?
Like the light bulb going off.
Exactly. But we forget about all the work that goes into actually making that invention useful. Like, take penicillin, right? It was discovered in a lab, but it took a huge effort with government support during World War II to turn it into a widely available medicine that saved millions of lives.
So it's not just about having the idea, it's about making it work in the real world.
Exactly. And we see this with renewable energy too, right? Germany was really successful at promoting solar power, but the US, during the Reagan administration, they actually dismantled a lot of their solar programs.
Ah, interesting.
But then you have something like Operation Warp Speed, where the government went all in on developing and distributing the COVID vaccines.
Yeah.
That was super successful. It shows that when the government really prioritizes implementation, things can move really fast.
It's not just about ideas, it's about execution.
Exactly. And to really solve these problems, we got to move past broad ideological arguments and really understand how specific industries work, you know?
Yeah.
What are the real bottlenecks?
Makes sense. Can you give an example?
Sure. There's this shortage of primary care doctors in the U.S., right? And that's a direct result of decisions made in the 1980s. They thought there were going to be too many doctors, so they limited how many people could go to med school and get residencies.
Uh-huh.
And now we don't have enough doctors.
And that decision was based on what they thought was going to happen, not what was actually happening.
Exactly. And looking ahead, one of the biggest potential bottlenecks, energy, AI, all this artificial intelligence stuff, it uses a ton of energy.
No, for sure. Way more than people realize.
And if we want to power all that with clean energy, we got to build that infrastructure super fast. It might even be more important than specific AI regulations. Even big tech companies are realizing this. Like Amazon and Microsoft, they're signing deals with nuclear power plants because they need that clean energy.
Oh, that's interesting.
So the big takeaway here, I think, is that to reach this abundance, to have enough homes, clean energy, scientific breakthroughs, it's not enough to just point out the problems. We actually have to change the way we solve problems, like the processes, the institutions, all of that.
Yeah, because if those systems were built for the challenges of the past, they might not be the right tools for the challenges of today.
Yeah.
And that's a big question, right?
It is. Are the ways we're trying to solve problems now, are they actually holding us back from creating a better future? Something to think about, for sure.
Definitely.
Well, if you found this discussion interesting, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Share this with anyone who you think would find it thought-provoking, and check out the link in the description to buy the source material if you want to dive deeper. But most importantly, keep thinking critically about these systems and policies that are shaping our future and how we can create a world with true abundance.
Absolutely. Well said.